Critical Role's new podcast is here, and it's very different than anything they've tried before.
That's a good thing, right?
Today, Critical Role launched its newest podcast series, the Reslayer's Take, a new actual play series set in Exandria that will air every week. As soon as you start listening to the show, it's pretty obvious that this is very unlike Critical Role or Candela Obscura or any other actual play show hosted by Critical Role. This is a tightly produced, all-ages podcast that uses D&D more as a tool rather than the focus of the show itself. So, is the Reslayer's Take worth listening to, and is it being set up for success? Let's dig into the first episode of the show and find out. But before we get started, don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons so we can keep making this kind of content. Now, this marks the first time that Critical Role has crafted a dedicated audio-only actual play podcast, with their previous podcasts either being audio versions of their various shows or something like Midst, which has nothing to do with tabletop RPGs whatsoever. While Critical Role's podcasts are just as long as the video versions of the episode, the Reslayer's Take's first episode is less than an hour long and focuses on the narrative rather than the personality of the players. While the show does use Dungeons & Dragons, it's more of a narrative tool. It doesn't fixate on class abilities or rulings or anything like that. There are checks and attack rolls, but the show doesn't really stop to explain the actual rules of D&D to listeners outside of a very brief explanation at the beginning of the show. If you think that this is an actual play show designed to introduce people as to how to play Dungeons & Dragons, frankly, this ain't it. Now, the production level of the Reslayer's Take is also a bit different than what we've seen in past Critical Role shows. Critical Role and Candela Obscura both use background music, but this show contains voice modulation, sound effects, and other little details that are designed to keep people interested in the show as they listen to it. That production level also comes through in how the show is edited. For instance, combat lasts less than 10 minutes in the show, as opposed to dragging for like an hour, which is the norm for a 6-member party, and is also, frankly, kind of the norm for something like Critical Role. Now, the real question here is the all-ages component of the series. The Reslayer's Take isn't a dumbed-down story, but it is missing the cursing and the raunchy jokes that are prevalent in other Critical Role productions. That and the more focused presentation makes the series kid-friendly, but it's unclear how this will actually hit with kids. While there have been plenty of other audio-only podcasts that are big successes, Worlds Beyond Number, Not Another D&D Podcast, and Dungeon Daddies, just to name a few, they are primarily geared towards adults. However, while common sense dictates that the podcast medium in general tends to cater to more adult audiences, think about how you listen to podcasts and think about whether a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old can access those platforms. That's not actually the case. A recent study stated that nearly half of the United States children consume podcasts, and half of those listeners consume podcasts with a family member. Basically, the Reslayer's Take is hoping that it will succeed because there's a significant demographic of Critical Role listeners who have kids and want to share their hobby with kids. That is how the Reslayer's Take will find its audience, at least hypothetically. Now, on the flip side, kid-friendly podcasts tend to be shorter in length than the Reslayer's Take. We saw a statistic that said they only last about 10 to 20 minutes in length. And also, kids are much more likely to consume video content. In fact, it's estimated that the average US child consumes about 4 hours a day on video. So there's definitely a little bit of a handicap there by choosing to limit the show to audio only. We don't know how they get around that, but maybe it might be worth posting the audio to YouTube eventually. Who knows? Now, from our listen of the Reslayer's Take, we think it's a pretty cool podcast, and it's unlike anything else we've heard from Critical Role thus far, which we think is a good thing as Critical Role is trying to position itself as more than just a niche brand built around one specific show. But we also recognize that this show is a little bit of a swing for them. It's a risk, and it's unclear whether it's going to end up being a hit or if it's just going to be another low viewership, or I guess low listenership in this case, niche show. So what are your thoughts about the Reslayer's Take? Let us know in the comments, and don't forget to hit those like and subscribe buttons.